This is going to be a very nostalgic video for me. Today, we are going to be revisiting Super Mario 3D Land. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I don't plan to make an entire series or anything like that on this game, but, you know, if you guys would want something like that, definitely let me know, because I haven't replayed this game in, oh man, it's been about a whole year. Yeah, believe it or not, this is a game that I end up replaying just from front to back and usually end up 100% completing at least once per year just because I love this game so much. But before we get into talking about all that, let's go ahead and start up a new game. It is also worth noting that while yes, we are emulating this game, I did rip it from like my actual physical copy. I don't believe in pirating games. I mean, I've also given my thoughts on that before to where like if it's not actually available anymore through like, you know, official means, then there's not really that big of an issue with it in my opinion. But you know, again, conversation for a whole other day. That being said, it seems like the game has maybe frozen? Never mind. Okay, the file has been created, so I think it's all good now. I have no idea what happened there. The game just kind of froze. Oh, there we go. Opening cutscene. I've always loved this. You hear the band Jack Black? There's Mario. Oh my gosh. Oh man, as much as I love the new voice actor for Mario, Charles Martinet, is just like, that is Mario in my mind. Or Chris Pratt. You know, Chris Pratt did a great job in the movie. But anyway, yeah, I always love this part too, like right here in the beginning, and it only happens at the beginning. Mario's like, oh, he's spazzing out, he's sweating, he's breathing real heavy, he's gotta get to Peach. I mean, he doesn't do that, like, for any of the other level selects after this first level. It's only for this first one, but I always thought that was just a neat little detail. But then here we are in the game. Also, it is also worth noting that if anything sounds a little off, I apologize. I believe with the emulator, it's automatically trying to run it at 60 FPS. Therefore, it might influence the speed of some of the animations or the music, because, I don't know, to my ear, it doesn't sound like it's off, but it might be just ever so slightly. Also, I am noticing that the game is stuttering a little bit, so if you'll excuse me, I'm going to pause it for a moment, and we are going to enable asynchronous compilation, which may result in a few temporary graphical issues as we play, but it will result in less stuttering, which should hopefully mean a smoother experience for me playing and you watching. Just kidding, it turns out I would actually have to restart the entire game in order to do that, which would mean that I'd have to sit through the whole opening cutscene and that whole startup process again, so we're just gonna roll with it. Hopefully everything will kind of work out fine. But yeah, this is also my first time trying to play this game with an Xbox 360, or an Xbox One controller, sorry. So, you know, it's one of those things where if I was playing with a normal 3DS, obviously I'd be having no issues right now. But right now I'm just trying to figure out what buttons everything are mapped to. So it seems like the shoulder buttons are mapped to LB and RB. So yeah, that's all I needed to know. Got our first checkpoint here, man. Let me just say, okay, because this is one of the things I wanted to say before we got into the game, but obviously I didn't want to drag out the intro for too long. Super Mario 3D Land, in my opinion, is the most underrated, oh my gosh, voice crack. I'm 12 years old again. Super Mario 3D Land is easily the most underrated 3D Mario. Now, in recent years, you know, there's people that have been coming around 3D World, for example, and Bowser's Fury. Oh, well, there was never really any hate or disdain for Bowser's Fury, but obviously it was kind of like part of the package of 3D World. So that in itself was just kind of overlooked for a while until in the last, I want to say, like 2 to 3 years, you know, people have finally been coming around to 3D World and be like, wow, this is actually a really fun game. We shouldn't have dunked on this as much as we did. And then as far as the other 3D Marios are concerned, I mean, there's always been love for them, right? Like, you look at something like, for example, Sunshine on the GameCube. Sure, that one has always been a bit more, I don't want to say niche, but always just more of like the outsider, kind of. You know, when you look at 3D Mario, you got your Mario Galaxy, you got your Super Mario 64. Everybody looks at those games as timeless masterpieces, some of the greatest games of all time. And while Super Mario Sunshine is still in the discussion of, hey, this is a great 3D Mario game, I still feel like it's still kind of overlooked in the grand scheme of not just 3D Mario, but Mario in general. But yeah, again, when you look at all the 3D Mario games, you have Mario Sunshine, 64, all the Galaxy games, as well as 3D World, and then Odyssey. And while 3D World has finally started to get the love that it has truly deserved from the start for not, I mean, it's a truly innovative game when you think about it. It took something as simple as 2D Mario and tried to put it into a 3D space. And while it wasn't the first game to do that, obviously, 3D Land was the first one to actually do that, and 3D World came out after the fact. But again, the fact that 3D World was able to take everything that 3D landed, which again was taking 2D Mario, putting it into a 3D space, and while that may sound simple on the surface, when you look at 2D Mario, everything from the first 2D Mario back in 1985 on the NES up to everything that we've had since then with, like, you know, Mario 2, which is definitely the black sheep, I want to say, of the Mario franchise, which is really unfortunate because even though we've had multiple iterations of Super Mario Bros. 2, whether that be the Game Boy Advance version, the Super Mario All-Stars version, or just the original NES version, again, it's just sort of always been that black sheep in the Mario franchise, which, well, sure, it's completely different from any other Mario game between Mario 1, Mario 2, or anything that came after it. I always appreciated that game just for, like, how unique it is and for trying to switch up the formula in the way that it did. And for those that don't know, Mario Bros. 2 wasn't even a Mario game to begin with. It's actually a reskin of a game called Doki Doki Panic over in Japan, which is why it felt and played absolutely nothing like a Mario game. But still, I've always genuinely loved that game. But anyways, getting back on track here, yeah, you know, we've had these amazing Mario games between the classic ones on the NES and then all the ones on the SNES going up to the new Super Mario Bros. Games, which I know, you know, those are still pretty controversial in the grand scheme of things, but it does kind of seem like as time has gone on, the general conversation or opinion of those games is finally changing, which I always said that they would. You know, there was always detractors for games like especially like New Super Mario Bros. U, because that was around the time where New Super Mario Bros. U and New Super Mario Bros. 2 were coming out in the same year, and people were just starting to, I guess, kind of get fatigued to New Super Mario Bros., which I never really understood. These are the types of games that you can knock out in, like, not even 5 hours, you know what I mean, like New Super Mario Bros. So I never really understood why there was any fatigue. Like, you know, you play through the game in like 5-ish hours, maybe spend double to triple that to fully complete it, and you get one of those every couple years. And at the end of the day, it's just Mario. Like, let Mario be Mario. It's a 2D platformer. You're jumping in to do just that. Jump around, have fun. It's just a chill, laid-back time. On one hand, like, I kind of understand the sentiment. Like, yes, they all had very similar levels and art styles and such, but even then, if you go back and play like New Super Mario Bros. DS and then look at Wii and Wii U and New Super Mario Bros. 2, I mean, I feel like the art styles were different enough and they were always doing enough to switch things up. Sure, there could be a conversation to be had for maybe like towards New Super Mario Bros. U being the least innovative of the New Super Mario Bros. Games, I will say that, but at the same time, I feel like New Super Mario Bros. U was really just there to not only be, you know, a fun, chill, laid-back launch title for the Wii U, but also just to kind of be like the, I guess, definitive New Super Mario Bros. Game, to where it's New Super Mario Bros. Finally in HD. It has most of the power-ups from the previous games, as well as bringing back some classic power-ups. The levels are very tightly designed, unlike New Super Mario Bros. Wii, where, for example, you know, the levels were very big, very spread out, and it's very obvious that they were built with co-op in mind. Also, before I go on anymore, let me just say that I always loved this level in 3D, especially just because, you know, I talked about it in my Nintendo Lite consoles video that I made just a couple days ago, where 3D, it always kind of hurt my eyes and made me feel kind of sick, so I never really got to use it that much. That being said, this game was always one of my favorite examples to show people of like, hey, you want to see how 3D can ultimately change an experience potentially for the better, and even if not for the better, at least just change it up enough to where it feels like a new experience or a fresh experience, even if you played the game before. 3D Land was always one of the games that I pointed to, just because of how they used 3D to their advantage when designing the levels in the game itself. Like, there were so many innovative ways that they used 3D in this game. Another example I can think of is those levels where, if you look at it in 2D, it might just look like a simple line of boxes, but then when you put it in 3D, you can actually see the depth of the boxes that you need to jump on to get a certain power-up. Like, those were always super crazy innovative in my mind. But anyways, getting back on track here, talking about New Super Mario Bros. Wii U, you know, again, it's just one of those things where they were just taking everything from that they learned from making the other New Super Mario Bros. Games and just sort of making the ultimate HD New Super Mario Bros. Game out of it, and I always loved Wii U for that. Not to mention the fantastic DLC that we got, which is basically just like a standalone game in itself, really, that being New Super Luigi U, which some people even claim to be their favorite New Super Mario Bros. Game, just because it's such a twist on the New Super Mario Bros. Formula, to where it's not just your basic, relatively chill, laid-back kind kind of easy platforming, but rather it's a hectic sprint to the finish the entire game because you only have 100 or not actually 100 seconds. We all know at this point that the timer in Mario games isn't actually seconds, but rather it's just like ticks in the Mario game that are kind of just like a time of their own. But anyways, yeah, you only have like 100 ticks to complete those levels in New Super Luigi U, which was just, even though that may sound like such a simple thing on the surface, like, oh, you don't have as long to complete the levels, it truly did fundamentally change not only the way that you played the game, but also just the way that the levels were designed and the way that the game felt to play. And it did feel very innovative, very different, even though it was essentially just an iterative experience on top of New Super Mario Bros. U, where it was just a bunch of remixed levels, essentially going through the same worlds and such. But again, it just felt so different, to the point of where, even though, yes, it is just considered to be like a DLC or a standalone DLC to New Super Mario Bros. U, most people just kind of consider that to be like its own game in the New Super Mario Bros. Franchise. But anyways, now that we kind of have the whole history of like 2D Mario laid out there, now granted, 3D Land did come out before New Super Mario Bros. U, so this came out at the end of 2011, whereas New Super Mario Bros. U and New Super Mario Bros. 2, those did come out in 2012. So technically at this point we only really had New Super Mario Bros. Wii and DS to kind of base off of when going into 3D Land, when it came to turning like, I want to say like 2D Mario, but more specifically New Super Mario Bros. Type of 2D Mario, because there is definitely a bit of a difference between classic 2D Mario and New Super Mario Bros. 2D Mario. If you get what I mean, you get what I mean. There's just like a difference, I guess, in the fundamentals or in the philosophies of the level design, which that may just sound absurd when I try to word it like that, but seriously, like, there's definitely a bit more of a approachable factor or an accessible factor to the New Super Mario Bros. Levels, whereas, you know, there's some levels, you know, even in the classic New Super Mario Bros. 3 or Super Mario World on SNES where you play it even nowadays and it's like, alright man, like, I still need a YouTube guide for something like this. Like, specifically I think to like the one Ghost Boo Castle in New Super Mario Bros. 3, like, sure, back in the day there was kids like me that just kind of banged their head against it so they figured it out, or other kids that used their Nintendo power to figure it out, but like, man, you know, with the way the gamers are nowadays, I couldn't expect them to figure out some of those Boo Castles, or like the forced loop-de-loop in Super Mario World, you know what I mean? Whereas New Super Mario Bros., it's obviously always been trying to be a bit more approachable and possibly even more just kid-friendly in general compared to some of those old Mario games when those were still released in that era of like, hey, you buy a game and even though theoretically you could beat it in 5 hours, you're actually going to spend like 5 months on it just because of the, you know, artificial difficulty. Which, hey, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm the same guy that still goes back and plays Battletoads, the original one, on an annual basis. Not you know, just because I enjoy the game and I enjoy that level of difficulty, even though it could be debated that, yes, it's a little extreme in some cases for no reason other than to just artificially drag out the game's length, especially considering the fact that it was an arcade game. We got our first Toad House here, which this was also another really cool use of 3D that I always really appreciated. You know, you come in here and it always made me reminded me of like Super Mario Galaxy, because like, even running around right here, like if you've played Mario Galaxy before, you've seen this exact like camera angle when he's like running around on the planets and such. So we're right inside. You got a present for us, Toad. Let's see. He's got a fire flower, which, yeah, we're coming up on a castle here, so I'm actually going to keep the Tanuki leaf just so that I can kind of like float around if I need to get around the castle a bit easier, but yeah, we can go ahead and leave the Toad House. And for anybody that has any experience or history with video game development or just even knows the slightest thing about it, even taking something that is seen as being a bit more accessible, like New Super Mario Bros., and turning those level designs, those philosophies, those ideas, just everything about it, the art style and direction, and putting it into a 3D space, while yes, at first it's easy because all of the New Super Mario Bros. Games, except for DS was actually very similar to DKC on the SNES, where it was sort of like pseudo 3D, to where some of the elements looked 3D, but they were actually still just sprites because they were animated, and you know, I don't want to say it's a complicated process, but essentially just to give you like the bare rundown of it, they would take 3D models, animate them, and then take the bare essential animation frames and just, you know, the designs themselves and turn them into sprites from there. But again, that wasn't necessarily a direct art style choice because obviously they were still trying to replicate 3D, but rather that was just due to the limitations of the DS at the time and them wanting to still have the game run at 60 FPS, or at least I believe New Super Mario Bros. DS runs at 60 FPS, maybe it's 30, but but regardless, it's still a very smooth frame rate, and there's never any dips in the game. So, and obviously, if they would have had more 3D models, it would have been, there probably would have been some more frame dips, just due to the fact that, yeah, sure, you know, the DS wasn't necessarily the most powerful system at the time, but it was also able to run 64 DS at launch, so who knows, maybe they could have got away with 3D models. Regardless, that's not really the point. The point is that the new Super Mario Bros. Games were technically in 3D, even though they were, you know, 2D games when you played them, but oh no, I fell into, that was my bad. Look, again, this is my first time playing this game with an Xbox One controller. Okay, I thought I pushed the stick in far enough to be safe, but apparently I didn't. That is completely my bad. Okay, so here's the thing. I really want to use my Tanuki Leaf, so would I have to drag the mouse down and then... Oh, yeah, look, I just click on it. That's nice. But anyway, yeah, even though the games were technically already 3D, basically, like, at this camera angle here, like, all the assets in the new Super Mario Bros. Games are technically in 3D, except you just play it on a 2D plane, sort of like what we're doing right here. And, you know, it's not that easy to take something like that and put it into a 3D space and actually have it work. Like, for example, you know, look at Sonic, right? As much as I love Sonic, you know, taking something as simple as the Sega Genesis games and putting it into a 3D space. On the surface, it may sound absolutely genius just due to, like, what Sonic is, right? You know, he runs really fast, you know, you got all the cool loop-de-loops, like, there's a lot of potential there, and while I love, like, okay, I'm gonna say this, and it's automatically gonna get me canceled. I love Sonic 06, as well as many of the other, don't worry, I know that I'm getting absolutely dominated by Bowser right now, but it's not a big deal, because I'm gonna hit that button, and then I have nothing to worry about. It's really that simple. The bridge goes bye-bye, and soon after, Bowser goes bye-bye too. That's it. And from there, we can just run through this little door. Hello, Toad! You were saved! Everything is okay! Man, I always love the look of little Mario. I don't know why, just especially in 3D, it's just... I don't know, I always loved how little Mario looks. But anyway, we jump into there, we go to the top of the castle, and we grab the little timer just to get some extra score once we do hit the flag, and just like that, that is the level completed. I know I could have jumped up on the crates to get even more score, but 'tis what it is. And that is also actually World 1 completed as well. And it is worth noting, Super Mario 3D Land is a bit of a shorter game, but it's one of those games where it's short and sweet and lasts for just as long as it needs to. There's 8 worlds in the game, and there's only about 5 or 6 levels per world, so you do the math, it's about like, you know, 40, 48 levels, but more around like 40. Oh, I did not mean to jump in there again, that's my bad. Anyways, where was I going? I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, you know, it's as controversial as it is for me to say, and it's gonna get me canceled, but I don't care. I love games like Sonic 06, as well as all the other quote-unquote controversial Sonic games, whether that be 2D or 3D. I love Sonic, man. That being said, regardless of how I feel about the games, it's indisputable that most of the fan base disagrees with my opinion, which is completely okay, because at the end of the day, it's just my opinion, and those people and those communities are entitled to their own opinions, and that's the beautiful thing about human beings. We can all just have our own opinions and coexist. It's completely okay. But that being said, obviously, just going based off of that, it's not always the easiest transition to put a 2D platformer into a 3D space and do it as to what a community would see as being quote-unquote correct. And while this obviously wasn't the first to a 3D Mario game, like obviously that's been around since the N64, it was the first time that they were trying to do it in the 2D style, which even Sonic has done to an extent since. If you look at something like Sonic Forces, to where, again, Sonic Forces is a game that I absolutely love, but I would say that that game is definitely a prime example of a Sonic game going from the 2D formula, except just doing that same thing, except basically in 3D. And while sure, it was more expansive than, say, some of the original 2D Sonic games, because there was more cutscenes and story elements and such, it was definitely much more of a straightforward experience like you'd expect from a linear 2D platformer. And again, as much as I love that game and truly do believe that it's an amazing game, most of the Sonic community would probably disagree with me. And again, we're all separate human beings, we can all have our own opinions on that. So the fact that Super Mario 3D Land was able to do that and knock it out of the park first try, that is definitely worth just kind of giving a round of applause, definitely worth commemorating. And yeah, I don't know, again, to this day, even though games like 3D World are starting to finally get the recognition and love that they deserve, I still feel like 3D Land is still just kind of, you know, for the people that love this game and know how great it is, they love it and know how great it is. But for the people that are still kind of sleeping on this game, or that they didn't play it, or still kind of brush it off for one reason or another, I definitely recommend that all of you go back and give this game a shot. Whether you emulate it, whether you get it legitimately, again, is one of those things where I don't necessarily support piracy, but at the same time, if a game isn't actually available by official means, I also don't see anything wrong with piracy. I probably shouldn't say that, you know, they're gonna come for me now, but I mean, it's my honest opinion. If it's officially available, buy it so you can support the developers and the publishers, for the good publishers that actually deserve that kind of support, like Nintendo. But, you know, again, when it's a game like, I don't know, like an NES game or an SNES game where it isn't actually officially available on the market in any conceivable way, I mean, do what you gotta do, man. There's no point in forking out a bunch of extra money to secondhand sellers when at the end of the day, it's only gonna benefit those secondhand sellers that are honestly gonna try to nickel and dime you for every penny they can, you know what I mean? Anyways, I apologize if this video felt a little rambly, so just to kind of get a little personal here for a second, I have ADHD, and some days it's worse than others, and, in some days, I'm able to talk fluently and, maybe even multitask and play video games and talk at the exact same time and have it be a rather coherent and fluent experience through and through, but other days like today, I don't know what it is, just between yesterday and today especially, my ADHD's been kind of bad, so it's one of those things where my talking isn't as fluent as it would normally be. I'm having some stuttering issues because I've always kind of also had a stuttering issue, which, I edit my videos a lot, so that does kind of help with that, but some days like today, it's kind of like, it just kind of depends on the day, where some days it's worse than others. Unfortunately, today is a day where it's worse than others, so that's been happening, and again, my ADHD's flaring up, so, I was kind of having trouble focusing on the game and talking at the same time if I'm gonna put the barriers down and be transparent with y'all, but hopefully you still kind of understood the tangent I was trying to go on, or understood what I was trying to say, or what I was trying to get at with this game, because at the end of the day, it's an amazing game, and I just feel like it deserves more love and recognition, because I do feel like this is the most underrated 3D Mario game at the moment. But anyways, that's where I'll leave it. I don't necessarily plan on doing a full playthrough of this game on the channel, but considering the fact that we knocked out a whole world in one video, and I could easily knock out another world in this video if I wanted to, we could probably knock out the entire game in like 4 or 5 videos, but hey, I'll leave that up to you guys. Anyways, yeah, that's where I'll leave it, and I'll kind of leave it to you guys to carry on the conversation from there, because I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts. But anyway, as always, massive shout out to go to the Patrons and channel members, taking on low volunteer, number shout out to on the volunteer, my last game, animated, and shit, on D-tier, Ron Bench, some of those thank you guys so much, you guys are literal legends. I love you. Thank you guys for watching, and amazing days to be beautiful. I love you all. Peace.